The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Blackwater, Oklahoma, causing Amanda Smith to flinch and drop the water pail she'd been carrying from the town well. Her heart raced as she pressed herself against the nearest building, memories of that terrible night 6 months ago flooding back with sickening clarity. "Just a drunk cowboy," muttered Mrs. Holloway from the general store porch. "Nothing to worry about, dear." But Amanda knew better. In her 23 years, she'd learned that men with guns were always something to worry about. Especially now, in 1879, when the West seemed filled with them. Forcing herself to breathe, Amanda retrieved her pail and hurried toward the boarding house she now called home. 6 months had passed since she'd fled Chicago after her husband's murder, and the subsequent attack that had left her both widowed and deeply traumatized. 6 months of nightmares, of sleeping with a knife beneath her pillow, of jumping at shadows. Tulsa might have been her destination, but her stagecoach had been delayed in Blackwater due to wheel repairs. When Mrs. Thornton, the elderly boarding house owner, offered her work in exchange for lodging, Amanda had accepted, grateful for any reason to postpone the final leg of her journey. "Miss Smith," the postmaster waved from across the street. "Got a letter for you." Amanda nodded but didn't slow her pace. Mail meant connections to her past, and her past was something she preferred to keep buried. As she rounded the corner toward the boarding house, she collided with a solid wall of muscle that sent her stumbling backward. The water pail clattered to the ground, splashing her skirts and boots. "Beg your pardon, madam." The deep voice belonged to a man who stood at least a foot taller than her, his broad shoulders blocking the sun. Amanda's throat closed as panic seized her. She backed away, eyes wide, unable to speak. "Let me help you with that." He reached for the pail. "No." The word burst from her lips as she snatched it first, clutching it to her chest like a shield. "I mean no thank you." His eyes startlingly blue beneath the brim of his worn hat registered concern. "Did I hurt you?" "I'm fine," she whispered, though she was anything but. "Excuse me." She darted around him, practically running the remaining distance to the boarding house. Only when she was safely inside, with the door locked behind her, did she allow herself to breathe. "Amanda, is that you?" Mrs. Thornton called from the kitchen. "Yes, madam." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Come help me with these pies. Mr. Carlson is bringing a new boarder by this afternoon, and I want to make a good impression." Amanda's stomach tightened. "A new boarder, a cowboy, I believe, just took a job at the Hartley Ranch." The older woman wiped flour-covered hands on her apron. "Been having trouble finding a decent place to stay." "But we're full," Amanda said quickly. "The Morrison room still has water damage from last month's storm." Mrs. Thornton waved a dismissive hand. "Fixed that last week. Besides, we need the money, dear. Winter's coming and coal isn't getting any cheaper." Amanda knew she couldn't argue. Mrs. Thornton had been kind enough to take her in, to ask no questions about the nightmares that woke the house, or the way Amanda refused to be alone with any male visitor. She owed the woman her cooperation at the very least. "When will he arrive?" she asked, trying to keep the dread from her voice. "Before supper, I expect. Now help me get these dishes done." The hours passed too quickly. Amanda moved through her chores mechanically, all the while thinking of ways to avoid the newcomer. Perhaps she could take her meals in her room, claim illness, anything to prevent interaction with a strange man under the same roof. The knock at the door came just as they were setting the table for the evening meal. Amanda retreated to the kitchen, pretending to check the stew while Mrs. Thornton answered. "Welcome, welcome," the older woman said. "You must be Mr. Crawford. Mr. Carlson told me to expect you." "Madam." The deep voice was familiar, sending a chill down Amanda's spine. "Frank Crawford at your service." Amanda peered through the kitchen doorway and saw the same tall man she'd bumped into earlier. In the better light of the house, she could see his features clearly, strong jaw darkened with stubble, those unnervingly blue eyes, and hands that looked capable of breaking her in half. Her knife was upstairs. The realization made her palms sweat. "And this is Amanda Smith, my assistant, Mrs. Thornton was saying, beckoning her forward. Amanda had no choice but to step into the parlor, keeping the dining table between them. "We've met," she said quietly. Frank Crawford removed his hat, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. "Miss Smith and I had a bit of a collision earlier today." His smile was apologetic. "Hope I didn't cause you too much trouble." She shook her head, unable to meet his gaze. "Amanda will show you to your room," Mrs. Thornton said cheerfully. "It's at the end of the upstairs hall opposite hers." Amanda's head snapped up in alarm. "I thought he would take the Morrison room," which was on the first floor far from hers. "No, dear, that's still not quite right. The Dalton room is ready." The room across from hers, with its door less than 5 feet from her own. "I can find my way," Frank said, perhaps sensing her discomfort. "No need to trouble the lady." "Nonsense," Mrs. Thornton insisted. "Amanda, take Mr. Crawford upstairs while I finish with supper." Trapped, Amanda led the way to the staircase, acutely aware of the heavy footsteps behind her. Her skin crawled with the memory of another man following her upstairs, months ago in Chicago. "This one," she said when they reached the top, pointing to a door but not opening it. "Washroom is at the end of the hall. Supper at 6. The words came out clipped and cold. He studied her with those blue eyes, and Amanda felt as if he could see straight through to the fear that gnawed at her insides. "Thank you kindly." He set his bag down and made no move to enter the room. "I won't be any trouble, Miss Smith. You have my word on that." Amanda backed toward her own door. "Supper at 6, she repeated, then slipped inside her room and locked the door. That night, after a painfully quiet meal where she'd said not a word, Amanda prepared for bed with dread. The knife beneath her pillow seemed inadequate protection with a stranger sleeping just across the hall. She pushed her dresser against the door, wincing at the scraping sound, then wedged a chair under the doorknob for good measure. Still, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the old boarding house made her stiffen. Every footstep in the hall had her reaching for her knife. Around midnight, she heard his door open. Her breath caught as she listened to his footsteps approach her door, then stop. For a terrifying moment, she expected the knob to turn, the wood to splinter as he forced his way in. Instead, there was a soft thud, as if something or someone had settled on the floor outside her room. Amanda rose silently and crept to the door, pressing her ear against it, breathing steady and deep. The occasional rustle of fabric. Was he? Sitting outside her door, the question kept her awake until dawn when she heard him rise and make his way downstairs. Only then did she remove the barricades and peek into the hallway. On the floor where he had been was the imprint of a large body in the worn carpet. And beside it, a peculiar item that made her brow furrow in confusion. A small carved wooden horse, simple but elegant, left directly in front of her door. Amanda stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. It fit perfectly in her palm, smooth and warm to the touch. Downstairs, she could hear Frank Crawford's deep voice speaking to Mrs. Thornton. Taking a deep breath, Amanda slipped the wooden horse into her pocket and went to face the day and the strange cowboy who had spent the night guarding her door. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Amanda helped Mrs. Thornton prepare breakfast. Her eyes kept darting to Frank Crawford, who sat at the table drinking coffee, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "Sleep well, Mr. Crawford?" Mrs. Thornton asked, setting a plate of eggs before him. "Well enough, madam," he replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. Amanda turned away, the wooden horse weighing heavily in her pocket. Why had he left it? Why had he spent the night on the hard floor outside her door? "I'll be working at the Hartley place during the days," Frank was saying. "But I'd be pleased to help with any repairs around here in the evenings if you've need." Mrs. Thornton beamed. "That's mighty kind. The porch rail has been loose for months. Consider it done." Amanda felt his eyes on her back as she worked at the stove. When she finally turned with the coffee pot to refill his cup, she found herself unable to avoid his gaze. "Thank you, Miss Smith." His voice was gentle, as if speaking to a spooked horse. She managed a nod, her fingers instinctively touching the wooden carving in her pocket. The next few days fell into an uneasy pattern. Amanda avoided Frank as much as possible, taking her meals early or late, retreating to her room whenever he entered the house. Yet each night, she heard the now familiar sound of him settling outside her door. Each morning, she found another small wooden carving, a bird, a star, a delicate flower. She kept them all, lining them up on her windowsill where the light caught their polished surfaces. A week after his arrival, a thunderstorm rolled in just after dusk. Amanda had always hated storms. They reminded her too much of gunshots, of violence, and this one was particularly fierce. Lightning flashed, illuminating her room in stark white, followed by thunder that rattled the windows. She huddled beneath her quilt, knife in hand, as the wind howled and rain lashed against the glass. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her cry out involuntarily. Then came a soft knock at her door. "Miss Smith," Frank's voice, barely audible over the storm. "Are you all right?" Amanda didn't answer, her heart hammering. "I'm right out here if you need anything," he continued. "Not going anywhere." Thunder crashed again, and Amanda flinched. Before she could stop herself, she'd crossed to the door and pressed her palm against it. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. "Why do you sleep there?" There was a pause before he answered. "Because you're afraid, and no one should have to be afraid alone." His simple words pierced something deep within her. Tears filled her eyes, though she couldn't have explained why. Another flash of lightning, another crash of thunder that made the house shake. Without thinking, Amanda unlocked her door and opened it just enough to see Frank sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, a blanket around his shoulders. His eyes widened in surprise. "Miss Smith." "You can sit inside," she whispered, stepping back. "During the storm, I mean, the floor must be cold." Frank hesitated, studying her face. "Are you certain?" No, she wasn't certain at all. But the storm raged outside, and this man had spent 7 nights guarding her door without being asked, without explanation, without demanding anything in return. "Yes," she said. He rose slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I'll just sit by the door if that's all right." Amanda nodded, backing away to her bed where she sat rigidly, knife still clutched in her hand. Frank settled on the floor near the door, leaving it partly open. "I can go if you change your mind," he said quietly. Thunder shook the house again, and Amanda jumped. "Not fond of storms?" he asked. She shook her head. "They sound like gunfire." Frank's expression softened. "They do at that." For a while they sat in silence, broken only by the storm's fury. Then, to her own surprise, Amanda spoke. "I was married." Frank's eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing, letting her continue at her own pace. "My husband was killed 6 months ago, shot by a man he owed money to." The words felt strange in her mouth after so many months of silence. "I was there. I saw it happen." Frank's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. The man who killed him." Amanda's fingers clenched around the knife. "He came back that night to our home. He said I owed him now." Understanding dawned in Frank's eyes, followed by a flash of something dark and angry. "Did he hurt you?" he tried. Amanda swallowed hard. "I fought. He was drunk, stumbling. I managed to get away, but—" She touched her shoulder where the scar remained, a permanent reminder. Not before this. Frank's hands had curled into fists, though his voice remained calm. "And the man, I don't know, I ran. Took what money we had and left Chicago that night." The thunder crashed again, but she barely noticed. "I've been running ever since." Frank was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small wooden object, a carved heart, not yet finished. He set it on the floor between them. "My pa taught me to carve when I was 10, he said. Said idle hands find trouble, but working hands find peace." Amanda watched as he drew a small knife and continued to work on the heart, his large hands surprisingly deft. "Lost both my parents to influenza when I was 19, he continued, eyes on his work. "Been drifting since, taking ranch work where I could find it. Was with a cattle drive until last month." The simple act of watching him carve, of listening to his low, steady voice, had a calming effect. Amanda felt her grip on the knife loosen slightly. "Why Blackwater?" she asked. "Heard they needed hands at the Hartley place." He shrugged. "No particular reason beyond that. Sometimes a man just needs to stop moving for a while." Another flash of lightning, another rumble of thunder, but it seemed farther away now. "The carvings," Amanda said. "Why leave them at my door?" Frank's hand stilled. "My mother used to say that handmade gifts carry a piece of the maker's spirit. Thought maybe you could use a bit of extra spirit. For protection." It was such an unexpectedly tender thought that Amanda found herself speechless. The storm continued to rage, but its power over her had diminished. They talked through the night, or rather, Frank talked while Amanda mostly listened. He told her about growing up in Tennessee, about his years driving cattle, about the places he'd seen and the people he'd met. Not once did he move from his spot by the door. Not once did his eyes hold anything but respect when they met hers. As dawn broke and the storm finally passed, Amanda realized she had slept for at least an hour, slumped against her headboard, knife fallen forgotten beside her. Frank stood, stretching his tall frame. "Thank you for the shelter, Miss Smith." She found herself wanting to ask him to stay, to keep talking in that deep, reassuring voice that had somehow kept the nightmares at bay. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you for the carvings." He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "My pleasure," he said, and stepped back into the hall, closing her door gently behind him. That night, Amanda didn't push the dresser against the door. She still locked it, still kept the knife under her pillow. But when she heard Frank settle into his now familiar position outside, a small part of the fear that had been her constant companion for 6 months finally began to ease. 2 weeks passed, and with each day, Amanda found herself less afraid of Frank Crawford's presence. He kept his word, working at the Hartley ranch from sunup to sundown, then returning to fix whatever needed attention around the boarding house. Every night, he slept outside her door. Every morning, she found a new carving. Their conversations remained limited to brief exchanges at meals, though Amanda no longer went out of her way to avoid him. Mrs. Thornton noticed the change, raising an eyebrow when Amanda actually responded to something Frank said at breakfast. "Feeling better, dear?" the older woman asked later as they kneaded bread dough. "I suppose I am," Amanda admitted, surprised to find it true. "Mr. Crawford seems to have settled in well." Mrs. Thornton's tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp, quite handy to have around. Amanda concentrated on the dough. "He's been kind. The older woman smiled knowingly. "Kindness can be rare in these parts, best not to turn away from it when it's offered. Before Amanda could respond, the front door burst open and Mr. Carlson, the town's banker, hurried in. "Mrs. Thornton, have you heard? There's been a robbery at the bank." His face was flushed with excitement. 3 men masked took nearly $500. Amanda's hands stilled in the dough. "Was anyone hurt?" "Old Jenkins got a knock on the head when he tried to stop them, but he'll be fine." Mr. Carlson removed his hat, twisting it nervously. "Sheriff's forming a posse to go after them. They were headed south." Mrs. Thornton clicked her tongue. "Those poor men will be riding into a storm. Look at those clouds." Sure enough, dark thunderheads were gathering on the horizon. Mr. Carlson nodded grimly. "Sheriff says they've got about an hour before it hits. With luck, they'll catch the thieves before then." A cold feeling settled in Amanda's stomach. "The Hartley Ranch is south of town." "Yes, and the sheriff's already sent word." Mr. Carlson replaced his hat. "Any able-bodied man who can ride is being asked to join the posse," which meant Frank would likely be among them. The thought sent a wave of fear through Amanda, though she couldn't have explained why. Frank Crawford was nothing to her, a boarder, perhaps a friend of sorts, but nothing more. Yet the idea of him riding into danger made her chest tighten painfully. "I should go," Mr. Carlson said. "Need to spread the word." After he left, Amanda tried to resume her baking, but her mind kept returning to Frank. Would he join the posse? Would he face armed men, men desperate enough to rob a bank, men like the one who had killed her husband and attacked her? By mid-afternoon, the storm clouds had darkened the sky to an ominous purple-black. Wind whipped through the streets, carrying the first spatters of rain. Amanda stood at the window, watching, waiting for any sign of riders returning. "They'll be back soon," Mrs. Thornton said, laying a hand on her shoulder. "No one's fool enough to stay out in a storm like this brewing." But as the rain began to fall in earnest, pounding against the roof and windows, there was no sign of the posse's return. Amanda paced, unable to settle to any task, her eyes constantly drawn to the window despite the limited visibility. "You care for him," Mrs. Thornton said quietly. Amanda started. "I don't." "It's all right, dear." The older woman's eyes were kind. "It's natural to worry about those we care for." Did she care for Frank Crawford? The man who slept outside her door, who carved her small wooden treasures, who had listened to her story without judgment? The answer came with surprising clarity. Yes, she did. The realization was still sinking in when hoofbeats splashed through the muddy street. Amanda rushed to the window to see several riders, hunched against the driving rain. One of them was Frank, his tall form unmistakable even through the downpour. Relief flooded her, so intense that her knees nearly buckled, but as the riders drew closer, she realized something was wrong. Frank was slumped forward in his saddle, held there by another man's supporting arm. "Mrs. Thornton," Amanda cried, already running for the door. "They're back, but I think someone's hurt." She threw open the door just as the riders reached the boarding house. Sheriff Davis dismounted first, then helped ease Frank's limp form from the saddle. "Got himself shot," the sheriff said grimly as Amanda rushed forward. "One of the robbers had a rifle, caught him in the side." Frank's face was pale beneath his tan, his shirt dark with blood and rain. His eyes flickered open at the sound of Amanda's voice. "Miss Smith," he mumbled. "Didn't mean to worry you." "Bring him inside," Mrs. Thornton ordered, already clearing the dining table. "Amanda, fetch my medicine box and put water on to boil." Moving with a calm she didn't feel, Amanda gathered the supplies while the men laid Frank on the table. His breathing was shallow, his skin clammy when her fingers brushed his forehead. "Did you catch them?" Mrs. Thornton asked as she cut away Frank's bloodied shirt. "Got 2, the sheriff replied. "Third one's still out there, but with this storm he won't get far." The bullet had torn through the flesh of Frank's side, missing vital organs but leaving an ugly wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Amanda held cloths to it while Mrs. Thornton prepared poultices and bandages. "Going to need stitching," the older woman said. "Sheriff, I'll need your steadiest deputy to help hold him." "I can do it," Amanda said, surprising herself as much as the others. Mrs. Thornton studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Sheriff, thank you, and your men will take care of Mr. Crawford now." After the lawman departed, promising to return in the morning, Mrs. Thornton threaded a needle. "Hold him steady, Amanda. This won't be pleasant." Frank's eyes found Amanda's as she positioned herself at his head, her hands gentle but firm on his shoulders. "Sorry about this," he whispered. "Hush," she told him, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Just lie still." He did try, but the pain of the needle pulling his flesh together made him jerk and groan. Amanda spoke softly to him throughout, nonsense words of comfort, her hands steadier than she would have believed possible. When it was done, they managed to move him to his room. Frank was barely conscious by then, his skin hot with the beginnings of fever. "I'll sit with him," Amanda said as Mrs. Thornton prepared to leave. The older woman gave her a long look. "Are you certain? It might be a difficult night." Amanda glanced at Frank's pale face. "I'm certain." Left alone with him, Amanda placed a cool cloth on his forehead. The storm continued to rage outside, but for once, she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the man before her, on each labored breath, each flicker of pain across his features. "Don't you dare die," she whispered fiercely. "Not when I've only just stopped being afraid of you." Through the long night, she tended him, changing the cloths when they grew warm, spooning water between his parched lips, watching anxiously for any sign that the wound had become infected. Mrs. Thornton checked on them periodically, but seemed to understand Amanda's need to be the one caring for him. Near dawn, Frank's fever broke. His eyes opened, clearer now, and found hers. "Amanda," he said, her given name on his lips for the first time. She smiled tremulously. "You're going to be all right." His hand found hers, large and calloused but gentle. "You stayed." "Yes," she didn't pull away. "You've spent enough nights watching over me. It seemed only fair." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before his eyes drifted closed again, this time in natural sleep, rather than feverish unconsciousness. Amanda remained at his side, her hand in his, as the storm finally passed and morning light crept into the room. Frank's recovery was slow but steady. The bullet wound, while painful, had been clean, and Mrs. Thornton's prompt care had prevented infection. For the first few days, he was confined to bed, a restriction he bore with surprising patience. Amanda found herself spending much of her time in his room, bringing meals, changing bandages, and increasingly, simply talking. She learned about his hopes for a small ranch of his own someday, his fondness for horses, his quiet faith in a better tomorrow despite the hardships he'd faced. In turn, she found herself sharing more of her own story, her childhood in Pennsylvania, her brief marriage to a man who'd been kind but reckless with money and trust, her dreams of a peaceful life that had seemed shattered forever on that bloody night in Chicago. "Is that why you came west?" Frank asked one evening as she changed his bandages. "To find peace," Amanda's hand stilled on the clean linen. "I came west because it was as far as I could get from Chicago. Peace seemed impossible." And now she looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "Now I'm beginning to think it might not be." A week after the shooting, Frank was able to sit in the parlor, though he tired quickly and still winced when he moved too suddenly. Amanda brought him a cup of coffee and settled in the chair across from him. "Sheriff Davis stopped by this morning," she said. "They caught the third robber trying to cross the river. The money's been recovered." Frank nodded. "Good. though I'd prefer not to have another bullet hole as a souvenir. One is quite enough." Amanda's voice was light, but the memory of that night, his blood on her hands, his life in the balance, was still too fresh. "Mr. Hartley came by as well," she continued. "Said your job is waiting when you're ready. That's mighty decent of him." Frank took a sip of coffee. "Though I expect it'll be another week before I'm fit for ranch work. At least." Amanda gave him a stern look. "Mrs. Thornton says you shouldn't rush it." He smiled at her protectiveness. "Yes, madam." A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, children played in the street, their laughter floating through the open window. It was a beautiful autumn day, the kind that hinted at winter's approach while still holding the warmth of summer in its embrace. "I haven't thanked you properly," Frank said suddenly. "For what?" "For saving my life. Mrs. Thornton told me you didn't leave my side that first night." His blue eyes were solemn. "Means a great deal to me." Amanda felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You would have done the same." "Yes," he agreed simply. "I would have." Later that evening, as Amanda prepared for bed, she realized something was missing: the familiar sound of Frank settling outside her door. For the first time in weeks, she felt a pang of unease as she locked her door and placed her knife under the pillow. But the unease wasn't fear, at least, not the kind that had haunted her for so long. It was something else, something that felt strangely like loneliness. On impulse, she unlocked her door and opened it, half expecting to find Frank there despite his injury. The hallway was empty, his door closed. Amanda stood uncertainly for a moment, then returned to her room, leaving her door unlocked for the first time since she'd arrived in Blackwater. She slept fitfully, waking often, each time glancing at the open door as if expecting to see Frank's broad silhouette there. By morning, she felt hollow-eyed and irritable, a feeling that only worsened when she entered the kitchen to find Frank already there, attempting to help Mrs. Thornton with breakfast despite his obvious discomfort. "You should be resting," Amanda said more sharply than she'd intended. Frank looked up in surprise. "Good morning to you too, Miss Smith." She flushed at his use of her surname, a step back from the intimacy they'd developed during his recovery. "I only meant you'll slow your healing if you push too hard." "I've been in that bed long enough," he replied, though he did ease himself into a chair at Mrs. Thornton's insistence. "A man needs to be useful." Mrs. Thornton exchanged glances with Amanda. "I'll just fetch more eggs from the henhouse," the older woman said, leaving them alone. An awkward silence fell. Amanda busied herself with the coffee pot, aware of Frank watching her. "Did you sleep poorly?" he asked finally. "You look tired." "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Amanda." The way he said her name made her look at him. "What's troubling you?" How could she explain that she'd missed his presence outside her door? That after weeks of fearing a man's proximity, she now felt its absence like a physical ache. "Nothing," she said. "I'm just concerned about your recovery." Frank studied her for a long moment, then nodded, though his eyes said he didn't believe her. "I appreciate your concern." The day passed awkwardly, with Amanda avoiding Frank as much as she had when he first arrived, though for entirely different reasons. By evening, her head ached with tension and unspoken words. After dinner, she retreated to her room early, claiming fatigue. As she sat by her window arranging and rearranging the wooden carvings Frank had given her, a soft knock sounded at her door. "Amanda," Frank's voice. "May I speak with you?" She hesitated, then opened the door. Frank stood there, still pale but steadier on his feet than he'd been that morning. "May I come in?" he asked. The old fear flickered briefly, then died. "Yes." He entered but remained near the door as he had during the storm. His eyes fell on the collection of carvings on her windowsill, and a faint smile touched his lips. "You kept them?" "Of course I did." Amanda's fingers traced the outline of the wooden heart, the last one he'd given her. "They're beautiful." Frank's expression grew serious. "I didn't sleep outside your door last night. I know. Did you miss it?" The question was direct, his gaze unwavering. Amanda looked down. "Yes," she admitted softly. Frank took a step toward her, then stopped, as if afraid of pushing too far. "I don't want you to be afraid, Amanda. Not of me, not of anyone. I'm not afraid of you anymore." She raised her eyes to his. "That's what scares me." Understanding dawned in his face. "Because it feels like betrayal, to trust again." No one had ever put it into words so precisely. Amanda nodded, tears threatening. "Your husband wouldn't want you to live in fear," Frank said gently. "No man who loved his wife would want that for her. It's not just that." Amanda's voice was barely audible. "I'm afraid of feeling something for you." Frank's breath caught. He moved closer slowly, giving her every chance to back away. When she didn't, he reached out and took her hand. "I've felt something for you since the first day," he confessed. "Even when you looked at me like I might bite." Despite herself, Amanda smiled. "I was terrible to you. You were protecting yourself. I understood that." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "That's why I slept outside your door. I wanted you to feel safe, even if it meant keeping my distance." Amanda's heart raced at his touch, but not with fear. "And now," Frank's eyes held hers. "Now I'd like to court you properly, if you'll allow it. No rushing, no pressure. Just a chance to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, has a chance to grow into something real." The sincerity in his voice, the respect in his eyes, the gentleness of his touch, all of it combined to push back the last shadows of Amanda's fear. "I'd like that," she whispered. The smile that broke across Frank's face was like sunrise after the darkest night. "Then I'll bid you good night, Amanda Smith." He raised her hand to his lips, placing a soft kiss on her knuckles. "And I'll see you in the morning." After he left, closing the door gently behind him, Amanda stood motionless, her hand still tingling from his kiss. For the first time in 6 months, she didn't reach for the knife beneath her pillow. For the first time, she fell asleep without fear of what the darkness might bring, and in the morning, she found a new carving outside her door. 2 hands joined together in promise. The weeks that followed brought changes to Amanda's life that once would have seemed impossible. Frank recovered fully from his wound and returned to work at the Hartley Ranch, but each evening found him at the boarding house, sometimes repairing things for Mrs. Thornton, sometimes simply sitting with Amanda in the parlor or on the porch swing. True to his word, he courted her with patience and respect. There were small gifts beyond the carvings: wildflowers gathered on his way home, a ribbon from the general store, a book of poetry he'd found in the Hartley Library. But more precious were the hours of conversation, the shared laughter, the gradual building of trust between them. October gave way to November, bringing the first biting chill of winter to Blackwater. The boarding house filled as traveling salesmen and cowboys sought shelter from the cold, making private moments between Amanda and Frank increasingly rare. "Ride with me on Sunday," Frank suggested one evening as they sat before the parlor fire. "There's a place I'd like to show you." Amanda hesitated. They had yet to venture beyond the confines of the boarding house or the main street of town. The idea of being truly alone with him, even after all these weeks, still triggered a faint unease. Frank saw it in her eyes. "Mrs. Thornton could pack us a lunch," he said. "We wouldn't go far, back by sundown." His consideration, always giving her a choice, never pushing, was what finally decided her. "I'd like that," she said. Sunday dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn day that painted the landscape in gold and amber. Frank arrived after church with 2 horses, both gentle mares from the Hartley Ranch. Mr. Hartley insisted. he explained as he helped Amanda mount. Said his best ranch hand and his lady deserved better than my old gelding, his lady. The words sent a pleasant warmth through Amanda despite the chill air. They rode south, following a winding creek away from town. Frank was a natural horseman, sitting easy in the saddle, one hand resting lightly on his thigh. Amanda had ridden before, though not often, and found herself enjoying the rhythmic movement and the crisp air filling her lungs. Not much further, Frank said as they crested a small hill. The sight that greeted them took Amanda's breath away. The creek widened into a small lake, its surface glittering in the sunlight. Around it, cottonwood trees still clung to their golden leaves, creating a natural sanctuary hidden from the world. "It's beautiful," Amanda breathed. Frank smiled. "Found it my first week here, riding fence lines for Mr. Hartley. Thought you might like it." They dismounted near the shore, and Frank spread a blanket on a patch of grass sheltered by trees. From his saddlebags, he produced the lunch misses. Thornton had packed fried chicken, biscuits, apple tarts along with a thermos of hot coffee. As they ate, Amanda found herself more relaxed than she'd been in longer than she could remember. The quiet beauty of the place, the gentle sound of water lapping at the shore, the comfortable presence of the man beside her all combined to create a sense of peace she'd thought lost forever. "What are you thinking?" Frank asked, his blue eyes studying her face. Amanda considered the question. "I'm thinking that I never expected to feel this way again." "What way is that, safe?" She met his gaze. "Happy." Frank's expression softened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You deserve both those things, Amanda, and more." The tenderness in his touch and his voice made her heart ache with a sweetness she'd almost forgotten. "Frank," she said quietly, "I haven't told you everything about what happened in Chicago." He withdrew his hand but kept his eyes on hers. "You don't need to tell me anything you don't want to." "But I do want to. I need you to understand." She took a deep breath. "The man who attacked me after he killed my husband, he didn't just try to rob me." Understanding darkened Frank's eyes, but he remained silent, letting her speak. "He said I belonged to him now. That I would pay my husband's debts with my body." The words came easier than she'd expected, the fear they once carried diminished by the passage of time and the safety of Frank's presence. "When I fought back, he became violent. I managed to stab him with a kitchen knife, but not before he'd torn my clothes, left his marks on me." Frank's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists, but his voice remained gentle. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Amanda Smith." Tears filled her eyes at his words. "I ran. I've been running ever since, until Blackwater, until you." "You don't have to run anymore." Frank's voice was rough with emotion. "Not unless you want to, and if you do, I'll run right alongside you." Amanda laughed through her tears. "That's quite an offer from a man who's only known me a few months." Frank smiled, though his eyes remained serious. "Sometimes a few months is all it takes to know your own heart." The implications of his words hung between them, neither quite ready to speak them aloud. After a moment, Frank reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden object. "Made you something new," he said, placing it in her palm. It was a carving of a woman unmistakably Amanda, with her long hair and the high-necked blouses she favored. The tiny wooden figure stood straight and tall, head lifted proudly. "This is how I see you," Frank said softly. "Strong, unbroken." Amanda traced the delicate carving with her fingertip. "Thank you," she whispered. They stayed by the lake until the sun began its descent, talking, sometimes simply sitting in companionable silence. As they packed up to leave, Frank helped Amanda to her feet, his hands lingering on her waist. "Amanda," he said, his voice low. "May I kiss you?" Her heart skipped, then steadied. Yes. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely there, a whisper of contact that nevertheless sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers for any sign of fear or regret. Finding none, he smiled that rare, transformative smile that made him look boyish despite his years. "We should head back," he said, though he made no move to release her. Amanda nodded, reluctantly stepping away. As they mounted their horses for the return journey, she found herself already looking forward to their next visit to the lake, and to whatever lay ahead on this unexpected path. They were traveling together. The first snow fell in early December, transforming Blackwater into a glistening wonderland overnight. Amanda woke to find the world outside her window draped in white, the morning sun turning each surface to diamond. She dressed quickly, eager to see the snow up close. In the kitchen, Mrs. Thornton was already preparing breakfast, the smell of coffee and frying bacon filling the warm room. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the older woman said, nodding toward the window. "First real snow of the season." "It's lovely," Amanda agreed, taking up her usual task of setting the table. Frank arrived as they were finishing preparations, stomping snow from his boots at the door. His cheeks were red from the cold, his breath visible in the frosty air. "Morning, ladies," he called, removing his hat. "Quite a sight out there." His eyes met Amanda's, and the warmth in them belied the chill he'd brought in from outside. Since their trip to the lake and that first gentle kiss, something had shifted between them. The cautious friendship had deepened, blossoming into something neither of them had put into words yet, but which they both felt with increasing certainty. "The town's planning a Christmas social at the church next weekend," Mrs. Thornton said as they sat down to breakfast. "Music, dancing, food. The whole community turns out." Frank glanced at Amanda. "Sounds like a fine time. Would you care to attend, Miss Smith?" He still used her formal name in public, a courtesy that Amanda appreciated even as she looked forward to the private moments when he called her Amanda. "I would," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After breakfast, Frank prepared to leave for the ranch. "I'll be back early today," he told Amanda at the door. "Mr. Hartley's giving us half days with the weather being what it is." "Be careful," she said, adjusting his scarf. The casual intimacy of the gesture struck her only after she'd done it. Frank's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Always am." He hesitated, then leaned down to place a quick kiss on her cheek. "See you this afternoon." Amanda watched him go, her cheek tingling from his kiss. Behind her, Mrs. Thornton cleared her throat. "That young man is sweet on you," the older woman said matter-of-factly. Amanda turned, unable to hide her smile. "I know." Mrs. Thornton's eyes softened. "And you on him?" "Yes," Amanda admitted, "though I never expected it." The best things in life are rarely what we expect. The older woman patted Amanda's hand. "I'm happy for you, dear. You deserve some joy after all you've been through." The words brought unexpected tears to Amanda's eyes. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Thornton. For taking me in, for not asking questions, for understanding. Call me Ethel, dear. After all these months, I think we're past formalities." The older woman smiled. "Now let's get these dishes done. I want to bake cookies for the church social, and I'll need your help." The day passed in a flurry of domestic activity. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen was warm with the scent of ginger and cinnamon, trays of cookies cooling on every available surface. Outside, the snow continued to fall, softer now, adding to the thick blanket already covering the ground. Frank returned as promised, bringing with him a small pine tree. "Thought we might have a bit of Christmas cheer," he explained, setting it up in the corner of the parlor. Amanda found a box of ornaments in the attic, delicate glass balls, wooden figures, strands of cranberries from Mrs. Thornton's preserves. Together, they decorated the tree while Mrs. Thornton played carols on the old piano in the corner. As darkness fell, the boarding house glowed with warmth and light. Other boarders returned from their day's activities, exclaiming over the tree and the cookies, creating a festive atmosphere that reminded Amanda of happier Christmases from her childhood. Later, after the others had retired for the night, Amanda and Frank sat alone before the fire. He had taken to spending his evenings this way, talking with her until the fire burned low, then bidding her good night with a gentle kiss before retiring to his room. Tonight, though, something seemed to be on his mind. He was quieter than usual, his gaze often drifting to the flames. "Is everything all right?" Amanda asked finally. Frank looked up, his expression serious. "Been thinking about something Mr. Hartley said to me today." "Oh, he's expanding his operation come spring, buying the old Peterson place to the east." Frank hesitated. "He's asked me to oversee it. Build a house there, manage that portion of the ranch." Amanda felt a sudden tightness in her chest. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity." "It is." Frank met her eyes directly. "But I told him I needed to think on it. Depends on some other factors." "What factors?" she asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Frank set aside his coffee cup and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Amanda Smith," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "I love you." The simple declaration, spoken so plainly, so honestly, made her heart swell. "Frank, please let me finish." He took a deep breath. "I know we haven't known each other long. I know you've been through more pain than any woman should have to bear. And I would understand completely if you're not ready for what I'm about to ask." Amanda felt tears gathering, though whether from joy or fear or some combination of the two, she couldn't have said. "I'm asking you to marry me," Frank continued. "To build a life with me at the Peterson place, or wherever you want to go. I promise to respect your boundaries, to never rush you, to spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." He reached into his pocket and withdrew not a ring, but a small wooden carving. Two figures standing side by side, hands joined, faces turned toward each other. "I can't offer you wealth or fancy things," he said, placing the carving in her palm. "But I can offer you this, my heart, my hands, my word." Amanda looked down at the tiny carved couple, their future, captured in wood by Frank's skilled hands. A future she'd stopped believing was possible on that terrible night in Chicago. "Frank," she whispered, raising her eyes to his. "I love you too." The hope that bloomed on his face was beautiful to behold. "Is that a yes?" Amanda nodded, unable to speak past the emotion closing her throat. Frank's smile was radiant as he rose, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. His kiss was still careful, still respectful of her boundaries, but held a new certainty, a promise of all that lay ahead. When they finally parted, both breathless, Frank rested his forehead against hers. "I'll make you happy, Amanda. That's my solemn vow." "You already do," she told him, and realized it was true. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long had finally given way to something brighter, something that felt remarkably like hope. That night, for the first time, Frank didn't need to sleep outside her door. Because, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Amanda wasn't afraid of the dark or of the future it might bring. The news of Frank and Amanda's engagement spread quickly through Blackwater. Mrs. Thornton Ethel was the first to congratulate them, her eyes suspiciously bright as she hugged Amanda and shook Frank's hand. "I knew from the moment you started sleeping outside her door that you were a man of uncommon character, Frank Crawford," she said. "And I've never seen Amanda smile the way she does when you're around." Mr. Hartley was equally pleased when Frank informed him of their plans. "Always hoped you'd settle here," the rancher said, clapping Frank on the back. "That house on the Peterson place needs a woman's touch. With you managing that section and my boy taking over the main ranch when he's older, I can start thinking about retirement." The Christmas social at the church became an impromptu engagement celebration. Amanda, wearing her best dress deep green wool with a lace collar, found herself the center of more attention than she'd ever wanted. But with Frank at her side, steady and protective without being overbearing, she managed to accept the good wishes with grace. "When's the wedding, Mrs. Davis?" the sheriff's wife asked as they sampled Christmas pudding. Amanda glanced at Frank. They hadn't discussed specifics yet, both content to enjoy their newly acknowledged feelings without rushing into plans. "Spring, I expect," Frank answered. "Once the house is ready." "A spring wedding would be lovely," Mrs. Davis agreed. "Though winter ceremonies have their own charm. My sister was married last January with snow falling outside the church windows. Quite beautiful." As the evening continued, Amanda found herself drawn into conversations about wedding preparations, household necessities, the challenges and joys of married life. It was strange to think of herself as a bride again, strange but not unwelcome. Later, as they walked home through the snow-covered streets, Frank noticed her thoughtful expression. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, only half joking. Amanda squeezed his arm. "No, just adjusting. I never expected to be planning a wedding again." Frank's face sobered. "We can wait as long as you need, Amanda. The house won't be ready until April at the earliest. It's not that." She stopped, turning to face him under the glow of a street lamp. Snow fell softly around them, catching in Frank's dark hair and on the shoulders of his coat. "I want to be your wife, Frank. I just need to get used to the idea that I deserve this happiness." Frank's expression softened. He cupped her face gently in his gloved hands. "You deserve every happiness this world has to offer, Amanda Smith. And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you get it." His kiss was warm despite the cold night air, a promise Amanda was beginning to believe could be kept. Christmas arrived with another heavy snowfall. The boarding house was festive with greenery and ribbons. The pine tree Frank had brought now decorated with small gifts for each resident. Amanda had spent weeks secretly carving a gift for Frank, a small wooden horse, nowhere near as fine as his work but made with love and determination. "It's perfect," he said when he unwrapped it on Christmas morning. "Did you carve this yourself?" Amanda nodded, pleased by his surprise. "Mrs. Peterson at the Mercantile gave me some lessons. I wanted to give you something like what you've given me." Frank's gift to her was equally meaningful. A silver locket, simple but elegant, containing a tiny carved heart on one side and a lock of his hair on the other. "So you'll always have my heart close to yours," he said as he fastened it around her neck. The weeks after Christmas passed in a blur of activity. Frank divided his time between ranch work and preparing their future home, often returning to the boarding house with sawdust in his hair and plans to discuss with Amanda. Would she prefer the kitchen windows facing east or south? Should the bedroom have a larger closet or more floor space? Each question made their future together seem more real, more tangible. Amanda, meanwhile, began assembling the items they would need for their household. Ethel contributed linens and kitchenware from her own stores, while other townswomen offered everything from preserved fruits to handmade quilts. "It's like having family again," Amanda confessed to Frank one evening as they sorted through the gifts. "I didn't realize how much I'd missed that feeling." By February, they had set a date, April 15th, when the spring flowers would be in bloom and the house would be ready for occupation. Reverend Miller would perform the ceremony in the small church, followed by a celebration at the Hartley Ranch. As the date approached, Amanda found herself increasingly reflective. Her first marriage had been rushed, a youthful decision made without full understanding of what lay ahead. This time was different. She knew both herself and Frank better, understood the commitment they were making to each other with clear eyes. One evening in late March, as they walked back from inspecting the nearly completed house, Frank noticed her pensive mood. "Something troubling you?" he asked. Amanda hesitated, then decided honesty was the only way forward. "I was thinking about our wedding night." Frank's step faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "What about it?" "I'm nervous." The admission felt both difficult and necessary. "After what happened in Chicago, I haven't. I mean, I don't know if I can." "Amanda." Frank stopped, turning to face her. His expression was serious but tender. "I would never ask you for anything you're not ready to give. If all we ever do is hold each other, that would be enough for me." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. "But that's not fair to you. What wouldn't be fair is rushing you into something that brings back painful memories." Frank took her hands in his. "We have a lifetime ahead of us, Amanda. We'll take each step together, at whatever pace feels right." His understanding, his willingness to put her comfort above his own desires, was the final confirmation of what Amanda already knew. This man was nothing like the monsters she had feared. This man was worthy of her trust, her love, her future. "I love you, Frank Crawford," she said simply. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "And I love you, Amanda Smith. Soon to be Amanda Crawford if you're still willing." "More willing every day," she told him, and meant it with all her heart. April 15th dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed designed for beginnings. Amanda stood in her room at the boarding house, looking at her reflection in the mirror as Ethel arranged the veil over her hair. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant ivory silk with lace trim, ordered from a catalog in Denver. Around her neck hung Frank's locket, and in her hands she held a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning. "You look beautiful," Ethel said, her eyes misty. "Frank won't know what hit him." Amanda smiled, surprised by her own calm. The nervous bride in the mirror bore little resemblance to the frightened woman who had arrived in Blackwater nearly a year ago. That woman would never have believed this day possible. "It's time," Ethel said, checking the small clock on the dresser. "The buggy's waiting to take us to the church." The streets of Blackwater were quiet as they rode, most of the town already gathered at the small white church on the hill. As they approached, Amanda could see people filing inside, dressed in their Sunday best. Frank would already be there, waiting for her at the altar. The thought sent a flutter of anticipation through her stomach, not fear, but joy. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Amanda would later remember fragments. The sea of smiling faces as she walked down the aisle. Reverend Miller's kind eyes as he spoke of love and commitment. The steady pressure of Frank's hand holding hers. The moment he lifted her veil and looked at her as if she were the most precious sight he'd ever beheld. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Miller said finally. "You may kiss your bride." Frank's kiss was gentle but held a new confidence, the certainty of a man who had won something infinitely valuable and intended to treasure it always. The celebration at the Hartley Ranch lasted well into the evening. There was dancing in the barn, tables laden with food prepared by every woman in town, and more well wishes than Amanda could possibly remember. Through it all, Frank remained at her side, his pride and happiness evident in every glance, every touch. As dusk fell, they said their goodbyes and drove the short distance to their new home, the house Frank had spent months preparing for her. "Welcome home, Mrs. "Crawford," he said as he lifted her down from the buggy. In the fading light, the house looked even more beautiful than it had during their inspections, whitewashed walls glowing pink in the sunset, curtains visible at the windows, smoke curling from the chimney where someone had thoughtfully lit a fire in preparation for their arrival. Frank carried her over the threshold, a tradition that made Amanda laugh despite its predictability. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, simple furnishings arranged with care, wildflowers in a vase on the table, a quilt they'd received as a wedding gift spread across the sofa. "You like it?" Frank asked, suddenly uncertain. "We can change anything that's not to your taste." Amanda turned in a slow circle, taking in the home they would share, the life they would build together. "It's perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." As the night deepened and the time came to retire to their bedroom, Amanda felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. Frank, ever attuned to her emotions, noticed immediately. "I meant what I said before," he told her, taking her hands. "Nothing happens tonight that you don't want. Nothing ever happens between us that makes you uncomfortable." Amanda looked up at this man who had slept outside her door until trust grew, who had respected her boundaries while gradually helping her overcome her fears, who had proven with every action that love could be kind, patient, and healing. "I trust you, Frank," she said simply. "I'm not afraid anymore." And she wasn't. Not of Frank, not of intimacy, not of the future stretching before them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with the same patience and respect that had brought them to this moment. Later, as moonlight spilled through the curtains of their bedroom and Frank's breathing deepened into sleep beside her, Amanda reflected on the journey that had led her here. From the terror of that night in Chicago to the peace of this moment, it was a path she could never have imagined, yet one she now recognized as necessary. Every step, every fear, every moment of courage had brought her here, to a place of safety, to a man worthy of her trust, to a life filled with promise. Amanda Smith Crawford closed her eyes and for the first time in more than a year, slept without a knife beneath her pillow. 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The house Frank had built expanded to accommodate their growing family, first with the addition of a son, James, born in the winter of their second year of marriage, and then twin daughters, Emma and Elizabeth, who arrived 18 months later to general astonishment and delight. The Peterson section of the Hartley Ranch flourished under Frank's management. What had once been neglected grazing land became a productive operation, with healthy cattle and even a small apple orchard that Amanda had insisted on planting behind the house. "For pies," she'd explained, though Frank suspected it had more to do with creating a legacy, with putting down roots in a way neither of them had been able to before. Blackwater itself grew as well, with a new schoolhouse, a proper doctor's office, and even talk of the railroad extending a spur line to connect the town more directly with Tulsa and points east. On a warm June morning in 1884, Amanda stood at the kitchen window, watching Frank and 5-year-old James attempt to teach the twins to ride their new pony, a gentle creature Frank had selected specifically for its patience with small children. "Hold the reins like this, Emma," Frank was saying, his large hands engulfing his daughter's tiny ones. "That's it, just like your brother does." Emma, fearless at 3 years old, beamed with pride while her sister Elizabeth hung back, clinging to James's hand. "You don't have to ride today if you don't want to," Amanda heard James tell Elizabeth. "We can just pet Butterscotch instead." Amanda smiled at her son's protective instinct so like his father's, and at the way Elizabeth visibly relaxed at being given a choice. "Mama, look," Emma called, spotting Amanda at the window. "I'm riding," Amanda waved, her heart full to bursting with a happiness she'd once thought impossible. She had long since stopped marveling at the miracle of her family, of the love that had healed wounds she'd thought would never close. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the road, where a rider approached at a leisurely pace. As he drew closer, Amanda recognized Sheriff Davis, now silver-haired but still straight-backed in the saddle. "Morning, Mrs. Crawford," he called as he dismounted. "Hope I'm not interrupting family time." "Not at all, Sheriff." Amanda stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Would you like some coffee? That would be mighty welcome." The sheriff removed his hat as Frank approached, children in tow. After exchanging greetings and seeing the children settled with cookies at the kitchen table, the adults moved to the porch with their coffee. "What brings you out our way?" Frank asked, sensing there was more to the visit than social courtesy. Sheriff Davis looked uncomfortable. "Got a telegram from Chicago yesterday. Thought you both should know about it." He withdrew a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to Frank. "Man named William Blackwood was executed last week for multiple murders, including the killing of Harold Smith in 1878. Amanda's hand froze halfway to her mouth, the coffee cup suspended in midair. Harold Smith, her first husband. William Blackwood, the man who had killed him, who had attacked her, whose face still occasionally haunted her nightmares despite all the happiness of her new life. They caught him," she whispered. Sheriff Davis nodded. "Apparently he continued his criminal activities in Chicago for some time. Was finally apprehended after a bank robbery gone wrong. During his trial, he confessed to numerous crimes, including the murder of your first husband." Frank's hand found Amanda's, warm and steadying. "How did they connect it to Amanda?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Chicago police had been looking for you as a witness, Mrs. Crawford. When they couldn't find you, they proceeded with the other evidence they had." The sheriff looked relieved to be delivering this part of the news. "You won't be needed for any proceedings. The case is closed." Closed. The word echoed in Amanda's mind as she tried to process what she was feeling. Relief, certainly, a sense of justice being served. But also, unexpectedly, a sense of finality, as if the last thread connecting her to that previous life had been severed. "Thank you for telling us," Frank said, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of Amanda's hand. "Thought you should know." Sheriff Davis drained his coffee cup and stood. "Need to be getting back to town, but I wanted to deliver that news in person." After he'd gone, Frank and Amanda remained on the porch, hands still joined, watching their children play in the yard. "Are you all right?" Frank asked finally. Amanda considered the question carefully. "Yes," she said, and was surprised to find it was completely true. "It's strange, I thought hearing his name again would bring it all back, all the fear, but it doesn't have that power anymore." Frank squeezed her hand. "You gave that fear up a long time ago. Because of you," she said simply. "Because you showed me what real safety feels like." His smile was tender as he leaned in to kiss her temple. "We did that together." From the yard came a peal of laughter as James lifted Elizabeth onto the pony's back, her earlier hesitation apparently forgotten. Emma was already instructing her sister on the proper way to hold the reins, her little face serious with responsibility. "Mama, Papa, look at me," Elizabeth called, her earlier shyness transformed into cautious pride. "We see you, sweetheart," Frank called back. "You're doing beautifully." As they watched their children, these miraculous beings who embodied hope and second chances, and all the best parts of both of them, Amanda felt a sense of completion, of having finally arrived exactly where she was meant to be. The path that had led her here had been marked by darkness and pain, yes, but it had ultimately brought her to this place of light and love, to this man who had slept outside her door until trust grew, to these children who had never known a moment when they weren't cherished and protected. "I love you, Frank Crawford," she said. Leaning her head against his shoulder, his arm came around her, pulling her close. "And I love you, Amanda Crawford. Yesterday, today, and all the tomorrows to come." Together, they watched the sun climb higher in the Oklahoma sky, casting its golden light over the life they had built, a life founded on patience, respect, and the kind of love that heals even the deepest wounds. Amanda Smith Crawford had once been afraid to sleep beside a man again. Now, she couldn't imagine sleeping anywhere but in the protective circle of Frank's arms, their children safely dreaming in rooms nearby, their future stretching before them like the endless prairie, vast and hopeful, and filled with possibilities.